This is Semach Yehuda Richter. The last time I spoke to you, I promised a story regarding a U.S. politician from Minnesota. And before I start the story, I want to identify the politician and tell you that I wrote a blog for the Times of Israel on April 23rd, 2021, naming that politician, who is, I would assume by now you probably have guessed, his name was or is Hubert Humphrey. He was a vice president under Lyndon B. Johnson. Shortly after Kennedy was assassinated, the elections were held the following year in 1964. Johnson nominated Hubert Humphrey, and Hubert Humphrey became the vice president. In that article, I included some pictures of the gravesite of Hubert Humphrey, which is in Lakewood Cemetery, not too far from Lake Calhoun, which I believe now they've renamed. And you can see it's a very simple gravestone marker with his name and the date that he was born, the year he was born and the year he passed away, which reads 1911 to 1978. The story I want to share with you took place when my mother was very young. She was actually, I believe, a teenager. Hubert Humphrey was running, I think actually she was a little older than a teenager. I think he was running either for the mayor of Minneapolis or he was running for the Senate. But whatever the case might be, my mother was in a line that waited for Vice President, or at that time Senator or even Mayor Humphrey to pass. And the time that she waited, she did wait a long time, not as long as Esther Leah Abner. And again, Esther was my mother's name. Not as long as that, but there was a substantial wait for my mother to see President Humphrey, and she was Vice President Humphrey, and she was determined at the time to shake his hand. So when he passed, unfortunately, he did not look her way. And my mother, being a person who likes to try to get what she wanted, she jumped out of the line and she ran up to him and approached him. And she said to him, "Mr. Humphrey," she said to him, "I would really want you to shake my hand, but I'm very disappointed you didn't." And Mr. Humphrey turned around to her and said to her, "Young lady, if that will get your vote, I'll do anything to get your vote. And if that's what you want me to do, shake your hand, I will shake your hand." Hubert Humphrey was the type of person that would shake anybody's hand. He was the type of person that was a friend of everybody. He was not only a friend of everybody, he loved everybody, everybody loved him, and he was a person that had a legacy that we will always remember. I will remember him because I worked for his speechwriter. One of his speechwriters, her name was Jerry Joseph. I worked in downtown Minneapolis. Her husband ran a firm called I.S. Joseph. It was across the street from the Minneapolis Grain Exchange where my father worked. And I will remember those pictures forever. Sitting on the wall of Burton Joseph was her husband. And sitting on those walls was of the convention, or I would assume the 1948 convention, where Hubert Humphrey made that famous speech that demanded that the states come out of the shadow of states' rights and into the bright sunshine of human rights. Hubert Humphrey has a gravesite which is not too far from the George Floyd gravesite. Sorry, the George Floyd Memorial. And the question I've always had, and I always asked, and I asked in that article that I wrote for Times of Israel back then, was which legacy will be remembered the most as time passes? Will it be the legacy of Hubert H. Humphrey, or will it be the legacy of George Floyd? It's a big question which has yet to be answered, but at the moment, we all know the answer, especially considering who's in power at the moment. So I will leave you with that. I have more to say, and that will be coming up on my next video. Call to